Hello and welcome to another edition of our ETF Insight series where we chat with innovative leaders from the ETF and digital assets ecosystem. Today I'm really excited to be joined by Carolyn Barron, who is head of ETF Sales EMEA at Franklin Templeton. It's great to see you, Caroline. Why don't we kick it off and you tell us about Franklin Templeton and what you do there?
Sure. So Franklin Templeton is a global leader in asset management with more than 7 decades of experience. We manage about $1.5 trillion of assets and have clients in more than 155 countries. And we bring together a collection of independent specialist investment managers that provide clients deep experience, expertise, and boutique specializations across asset classes, investment styles, and geographies. And my role within that company is to look after ETFs. This is a new business for Franklin Templeton that we set up in Europe, in EMEA, in 2017. And we see that as a major strategy for the firm going forward.
You know, we were both on a panel together at the ETF Stream Unwrapped conference a few weeks ago, and we talked about distribution in Europe and some of the hurdles there. And I wrote a follow-up piece, as you know, about ETF education and a lot of the hurdles that fall within that and how hard it is to do. And I came up with 3 main points. And when we discussed it after the fact, you brought up something that was really important that I had overlooked. And it's one of the big differences between Europe culturally and the US. Can you expand on that? Because I think it's a very important point to bring up.
Sure, and I think this is a point that maybe people do not appreciate fully. So if you look at the US market, you tend to have fairly educated people when it comes to financial matters. The reason being is that retail investors have to look after their pension. They have to make sure they understand what's going on into them, because they will have to, know what kind of money they have at the end of the day and how much they have accumulated. So they tend to be much more financially aware than what we see in EMEA. In Europe, what we tend to see is that, the government is still leading when it comes to retirement. So they are in charge of, our pots of retirement. And therefore, that makes us probably a little bit less aware and less knowledgeable about these matters. We tend to rely on our countries, on our governments to see at the end of the day how much we will have. That will be less and less the case going forward because governments have got less money. And so retail investors will have to take much more ownership about their pensions and their savings. So the kind of need to understand what's going on will have to increase. And therefore, we see that starting a little bit, but this is still very timid. So when it comes to ETF specifically, it's not really a surprise that retail investors in particular are not very much aware of what ETFs are. If you look just at institutional investors, there's still a lot of people that are not aware of the benefits of ETFs, let alone what is the role of ETFs. So there's a lot that could be done going forward.
Do you think there's something in particular that, if you had to make a suggestion of like something that the industry could do or that an individual firm could do to kind of push the ball forward? And I know like cultural differences within the different countries is something that we can't fix overnight, but it really is a hard thing to come up with like the perfect solution in terms of like how do we move the assets forward in terms of like with the education? Do you have a suggestion around that?
I think, it's not one size fits all. There's probably a lot of different things that we need to look at. And I don't think that the gap that we see in financial knowledge or specifically on ETFs will get fixed tomorrow. It needs to be a multitude of different things that we need to look at. First, probably, to start with and to make sure that people are much more aware and educated about financial matters is probably to teach it at school and understand from a very early age what does interest rates means? What do they mean for you as a person? How does a mortgage work? How much do you need to save to make sure you have enough when you're going to retire? So those kind of basic concepts need to be taught from an early age. Now, when it comes to ETFs specifically, we were looking also at making sure that maybe you have ETFs being looked at from a curriculum perspective, because if you look at the degrees that you get in finance nowadays, some degrees will involve some knowledge around ETFs, but others will not. And therefore, we need to make sure that from a kind of financial standpoint, when you study finance, you need to study a variety of different things, from the different tools that you will be using in portfolios, like mutual funds, equities, bonds, futures, options. ETFs need to be part of that. We do see ETFs, being part of some of these exams that you take, but it's not homogeneous for now. So I think if we can get to a level where ETFs are being part of the curriculum you are being taught when it comes to finance, that will be a very positive standpoint. Then I think, you probably need to think about how you can enhance the relationships with regulators, and making sure that regulators are also aware of the role of ETFs, becoming more knowledgeable about the benefits, and making sure that they are more on a level playing field when it comes to mutual funds, equities, bonds, and the rest of the industry. So I think regulators do play a role, and we need to make sure that they're getting also the proper level of education about these tools. But I think also you have to think about regulation playing also an interesting role when it comes to making sure ETFs are going to be on a more level playing field. MiFID II is something that is going to help do that, where ETFs are going to suddenly become much more on par with other tools like mutual funds. So this is going to be a positive thing for ETFs. And I think also another area that we need to look at is the role of the press, and how the press is going to also influence how much knowledge individual investors, but also professional investors, can gain on ETFs. We need to keep writing about the role of ETFs, the benefits of ETFs in a portfolio. We need to keep educating also about the development of that industry, because if you look at the start of the industry back 20 years ago in Europe, it was a kind of a simple tool. It was what we call a passive ETF, where you're tracking a market cap weighting index. This is evolving very quickly in looking at tracking different sorts of benchmarks, from something that was market cap weighted into something that is maybe more factor led, for example, and then now into actively managed ETFs. So we need to make sure that all of the actors of the ecosystem, whether it be a regulator, an index provider, a journalist, all the types of clients that we cover, they need to understand how fast this is evolving and to understand what it means for them.
It's not just one player in the market that can make all these changes. And I think we do have to go at different angles, because it's like everyone within this ecosystem has to kind of just say, because there definitely is a big opportunity for growth here in Europe. Everyone working on this together, hopefully will make some big changes. Oh, yeah.
It says about us, Andrea. Yeah. Also, I think it's the work that you're doing today to, push on education and try to make sure that people understand more, or ask maybe some of the questions. I think it's important to keep asking questions. So we do have to play a role as a provider. I think as a partner of the ecosystem, and making sure that people are getting more aware. You are also playing a role. So all of us collectively have to think about what is the best way to make ETFs much more, something that people use and are aware of, because this is such a fantastic tool. So the more people are aware, the better.
Well, thank you, Caroline, so much for your interesting insights. And for those of you who are watching, if you'd like to watch this video again or watch additional videos, you can go to blackwatersearch.com. And thank you again, Caroline.